In 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and it is the MGoBlog Roundtable. We have 2/3 of the crew with us this morning, as it sounds like things are things are looking really, really positive on the Fisher family front. I actually saw Seth for a minute earlier this morning as he was on the stream, and I believe they're home now. So that's great news there. Joining us though, the other members of the MGoBlog Roundtable, the guy who started it all at MGoBlog. We'll come to him next. We'll start off first with the venerable Craig Ross. Craig, how are you this morning?
Feeling very old.
Why
I guess that
old,
means
Craig?
venerable. I've been hanging drywall all week.
Okay. All right.
So,
just like an old person.
Just like old people do. They don't know what to do. They got no value anymore, so they hang drywall. That's what I've learned.
And we have Brian Cook, the man who started it all at MGoBlog. Brian, good morning. How are you?
I'm well.
It is good, man. I wish so. We'll get this out of the way so we don't spend too much time on it, because I know it's not the favorite topic of the MGoBlog Roundtable. But we just had Andrea Adelson on from ESPN. She does a great job on the ACC beat. Thought this story of conference realignment and expansion was over, and now comes word that it looks like they are moving closer to adding Cal, Stanford, and SMU, and those programs willing to forego all, in SMU's case, the TV money, and a good portion of it in the other two cases. And it sounds like that's enough to maybe get it done. What do you make of these latest developments?
I mean, I guess it's good that Stanford and Cal will be finding a landing place. I mean, those, particularly Stanford, has one of the best athletic departments in the country, and it was sort of ridiculous that they were going to be relegated to being in the Mountain West or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you got to feel for Wazoo fans, for Oregon State fans, because once those NorCals are gone, they're in majors, like permanently. And you got to figure that other schools are kind of looking around and is like, when is this happening to me? Like Iowa State, Northwestern, Wake Forest, like the Reaper is coming for those schools down the road, I guess.
Craig, what do you make of this?
Well, personally, I think the Big Ten is going to regret not being more aggressive vis-a-vis Stanford and Cal, particularly where they could get them in the short term on the cheap. One is that academically, it's just great for the Big Ten as a group, and secondly, you can still run a Western division of the Big Ten then, because you have 6 schools out there, and you've got basically the 6 good schools, and so in sports and otherwise. And so to me, I think the Big Ten has made a big mistake here on passing on Stanford and Cal, and they're going to regret it. That's my opinion. The ACC, I don't know how it's going to work for them with 2 schools. I mean, it looks crazy. I mean, I still believe, mark my words, that Florida State is going to end up as a subsidiary of Saudi Arabia. That they're gonna leave the ACC with, quote, private equity money, and I know what that means. And so we'll see. But I think from the Big Ten's point of view, they're being very short-sighted on this, and a few dollars in the short term is not worth passing on schools of that quality. Stanford from an athletic point of view, and both schools from an academic point of view.
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest revelation to me from talking to Andrea, who, again, I can't say enough, she's who I trust the most when I'm reading up on this. She said that Stanford and Cal, that the concessions that they're willing to make now weren't on the table before. And I just find that shocking. Like, I mean, you had no no leverage. You're asking to join. You basically, you do whatever it takes if joining is the most important thing. Well, if that's now on the table, does it make more sense now for the Big Ten to come back around and say, okay, well, if you're willing to forego all of the financial payout, then hey, does it make sense for you to join the Big Ten then? Does the Big Ten come back around?
Of course, it makes sense for the Big Ten to come back around. It made sense for the Big Ten to negotiate with them in the first place. So it definitely makes sense now. Yeah, in my opinion.
It'll be interesting to see if that's a wrinkle that's thrown in this thing, because it makes way more sense if you're Stanford to join the Big Ten. Is obviously a more desirable property to be a part of as well. We shall see. But the more pressing news, the bigger news on this front is the news out of Ann Arbor, of course, earlier this week that Jim Harbaugh will be suspended for 3 games, self-imposed suspension. So I know you guys have reacted on the blog, but not on the roundtable. Brian, what did you make of this decision?
I mean, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, they're going to be playing, nobodies with the best team they've ever had. He gets to coach during the week. He just can't be there on game days. Like, you or I could coach Michigan to wins in the first 3 games. Right. Craig, I don't know, but you or
I agree with that. no debate.
But so, like, I guess it's smart to try to get out of the way, because you do have Texas next year, and functionally it's a meaningless punishment. My only concern is that I hope Harbaugh sees it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hope he doesn't feel like he got stabbed in the back. But if there's some sort of punishment coming down the pike, you might as well take it when it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My instinct is, remember, I think Harbaugh and perhaps Michigan are being represented by Tom Mars on this, right?
Harbaugh is.
Harbaugh is. Okay. Yeah. Harbaugh is. And so my guess is what Mars has said to them is, look, are you guilty of this or not? And my guess is the answer is yes. My guess is the answer is, even if it's going 35 in a 30 zone, my guess is they agree. Well, yeah, we did this. So does everybody else. Well, so does everybody else isn't really a defense. And so my surmise is that Harbaugh, at least through Mars, have been very involved in this outcome. It would be crazy if not. And so I've seen a lot of people who are quite mad, quite upset about it, saying, well, we're just admitting guilt when everybody else is murdering. And I say, yeah, but are we guilty? And my suspicion is the answer is, yeah, we probably were. Now, is the stuff trivial? Of course. But still, let's get it over with. And to me, it was smart to do the 3-game suspension, because now you've taken all the steam out of the NCAA. What's the NCAA going to do? They're going to press this one to the max over an additional game suspension. They're going to press it to the max to make Harbaugh admit that he lied. Well, Harbaugh's never going to admit that he lied. And in the end, the more they press it, the worse the NCAA is going to look. Because as Harbaugh said at Media Day, I'm just waiting to tell my side of the story. And my guess is his side of the story is going to sound a lot more compelling than the NCAA side of the story, particularly when in the interaction between Mars and Harbaugh, Mars and the NCAA looked like they had crap all over their face when they say, hey, you guys can't talk about it, but we will. That's not something that played very well. And even guys like Feinbaum who hate Harbaugh are on Harbaugh's side of the equation on this one. So to me, it seems to me what Michigan did in this context has been smart. And I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but I do.
Well, I think you guys are very much on point. And Brian's point about comparing the start of this season to the start of next season, when would you rather? Right? Yeah, when would you rather serve a suspension? You rather serve it this season, for sure. If you understand, to your point, Craig, that a punishment is going to come at some point because,
Right.
look, we said back in the winter they made some concessions on things that you had no choice but to concede. I mean, you got guys in interviews and press conferences on video and audio saying, "Hey, yeah, I was coached in practice. I was coached by this analyst. Like he's my coach."
Right.
You can't. There's no getting around that, right? So I don't even think Michigan tried. There's going to be a punishment for that, but I think what you do is, it's the everyone does it is not a justification, but it does quantify, I think, the magnitude of the offense. Everyone does 40 and a 35. Not everyone commits murder, right? So
Right.
this to me, yeah, saying everyone does this, we take our slap on the wrist, we're gonna serve our 3-game suspension. Now, if you want to do something more, to your point again, Craig, if you want to do something more, NCAA, you're already feeling the heat of public scrutiny about coming down on us about this. Well, if you come down with another game or more games in the aftermath, and because you say Jim Harbaugh lied, now prove it. You just made a statement before saying it's not about a burger. Come public now and talk about why Jim Harbaugh and Michigan deserve more games as a result of this offense. And I don't think they'll be able to find, the kind of proof, if you will, that will appease the public in a way that would allow them to make this move. In my opinion, guys, I wonder what you think.
I 100% agree with what you just said, and I think that's the whole point of of falling on your sword right now. It puts Michigan and Harbaugh in a much stronger position going forward, and it makes the NCAA going forward look even more foolish than the people they are.
Mm-hmm. So, I found it a bit curious, because me, I'm gonna ask the guys who's gonna be coaching, and this time they have no reason to be coaching. It's like a we'll see. Like at least when I checked on it earlier this week, because I've been out all week. But just placing a few calls when this broke on Monday, like who's gonna be coaching, and it's like we'll see. It's like, man, what? That this is not determined makes me think that it maybe they might run a different guys in different games kind of thing. To your point, Brian, it really doesn't matter who's coaching the games. They're going to win anyway. If that's the case, do you just, put the hat on different guys in different games? How do you think it's going to go?
I'd expect it to be Sharon Moore.
That's that's what I suspect too. But
but like who coached the spring game? Was it Mike Hart, and who was the other team's coach?
I don't remember.
I can't even remember.
So,
but I asked specifically about that. Just so to put it out there, I asked specifically asking around, "Hey, is Sharon gonna be the coach for those games?" And what I got back was, "We'll see."
Well, maybe it'll be the Michigan method,
right?
That more Michigan method. Game A, Sharon Moore. Game B, Jesse Minner. Bowling Green, it'll be, a random fan from the crowd. Who knows? What'll happen. But it would seem the smart money on this would be on Sharon Moore.
Yeah, it would seem that way. Well, what this does, you wonder if this clears the way for the extension talk to progress. But then now they're in season, so you wonder if that tables it. Because they're in season now. I don't know the answer to that. But this was what I was told back when all that reporting in the winter was like, hey, the deal is on this table. He just has to sign it, which was never was the case. What I was told was they're going to get the NCAA thing out of the way. That's what all the concessions were about. They were thinking, we make these concessions, whatever suspension comes out of it, and then boom, once that's done, now we get Jim's extension out of the way, because we have shown that we have prioritized the NCAA. We don't think it's this nothing thing, and we just signed the coach and just treated these rules, these violations, as this flippant sort of thing. That was at least the thought process, but NCAA went all NCAA on them and made it more serious than it actually is, and so that has kind of pushed the extension talk down the line. You wonder if this brings it back to the fore.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any question that Michigan is planning on having Harbaugh around as long as he'll stay. So I think that's probably been communicated to him. Like he's not wondering whether his job is under threat, right? Like it's
right.
not.
But his
Go ahead.
job isn't under any threat and shouldn't be, but what Harbaugh wants to do remains an enigma. I mean, after last year, you can't say, "Oh yeah, he wants to be here." I mean, I think he wants to be here in some sense, but whether he wants to be someplace else more is remains an open question to me, at least.
Well, and look, I've come to the conclusion that at least for the next few cycles, the
Mhm.
NFL is going to be on the table. They're going to keep knocking every year, and I think he said his
Mhm.
criteria was I'm going to see what what my team thinks. I'm going to see what the administration thinks, and I'm going to see what the fans think, and that's all going to play into whether or not I stay. So that's kind of the criteria that's being applied, and I think that the extension talk for Michigan, from Michigan's perspective, at least with him, is kind of showing him, hey, yeah, we definitely are committed from a salary standpoint. We see what you've done the last couple of seasons, so we want to boost it to a level commensurate with the performance on the field, and that would show him in turn, hey, we want you to be here for for the duration. At least that's my take on his perspective on things.
Seems right. Seems right. I mean, that's what it looks like we're at right now.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk some football, guys. We're only 9 days away from the start of the Michigan football season, and we got the different lists that come out. Last week, I was asking you guys about the running backs list. Ira sent me a list last night of the cornerbacks list,
Mhm.
and number one on that list is Kalen King from Penn State. Number two on that list is it Cooper DeJean or DeJean?
I think it's
DeJean?
DeJean.
DeJean? Cooper DeJean, number two on that list, and Will Johnson, number three on that list. Who's what was the guy's name, Mr. Weintraub? If you got your headset on,
Heron. This was Anthony Heron's list from Big Ten Network.
Anthony Heron's list had Will Johnson behind Kalen King and Cooper DeJean. You think that's legit, Brian? You agree with that?
I mean, I think it's a wash between Kalen King and Will Johnson, and then DeJean is probably going to be a second round pick this year. So like, you could make the argument. They're pretty close at the top, and when that's the case, usually people who are just kind of putting together lists without any thought will go with the older guy.
Yeah.
So that's where I think we are.
Yeah, I don't make anything of that at all. I mean, it's Will Johnson's the youngest of those guys. He's a second-year player. So, it's just, okay, we'll take the senior first, or the older player first, or put it higher in the list. I think that's just sort of what happens, and I don't make anything of it.
Yeah, I guess for me, as I look at these lists and listen to the commentators, I take to heart what you guys said last week about, and Ira said the same thing, that you can't put Michigan at the top of every list. That's the approach that a lot of these guys take to this. I'm starting to think though that another part of this is that they think the sum is greater than all the individual parts. Because I look around, looking back to the discussion we had last week, I just wonder what people think of Rod Moore. Pro Football Focus loves Rod Moore, but what was it? Was it the Thorpe list, Ira, that he wasn't even on? And I'm like,
I think it
man,
was the Thorpe list, yeah.
yeah, how are we not looking at Rod Moore without question as one of the top safeties and top DBs in the country? So maybe it's just the regard for Michigan. The collective is greater than the respect for any of the guys or position groups individually. What do you make of that?
Well, safety is just a spot. It's kind of like, especially interior offensive line, where guys are just picking names out of a hat, really. Like, I mean, like, you're like, who is all Big Ten for the media this year? Who cares? I'll listen to the coaches a little bit, like, all right, that's probably a valid thing, but the guys just kind of escape by reputations. And like, Rod Moore wasn't an every down safety who's going to show up and make the number of plays in critical moments that is going to get him that notice. Like, he had some excellent plays this year, but for the most part, they weren't flashy enough to draw national notice, especially when the narrative around Michigan is always about, Corum and Edwards. There's just other guys in the spotlight. So there's only so much time that the national media has to talk about Michigan, and Rod Moore is too far down the list for people to think that he's going to be a Thorpe winner.
I'm always somewhat, not quite astounded, but someplace in that range of how much high school recruiting rankings seem to have a vestige, seem to have some sort of a stick to them. I mean, if you ask fans, Kareem Walker is probably a better running back than, Jim Brown because he was a 5-star out of high school. Well, it's somewhat amazing to me. And yeah, Rod Moore was not a highly regarded guy out of high school. Ohio State, I don't think offered him. I don't even know if they recruited him at all.
They recruited him, but they didn't offer him.
And I think Ohio State would probably say, I think we'd rather have Rod Moore than some of the safeties we actually saw last year in the Michigan game, for example. And some of those guys were like 4 or 5-star guys that they chose over Rod Moore. Well, some of it is probably coaching. I think it's pretty tepid to say the Michigan coaching staff right now looks better than the, say, Ohio State coaching staff. And some of it's conditioning. I think it's fair to say that Ben Herbert is right at the apex of what can happen on conditioning. And so, I think it's some of that. Well, he's just a 3-star. Okay, he's just a 3-star, but what is he doing now? Mm-hmm. And but for some reason that seems to stick. And I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. We were talking to I think it was Steve Clark. He was going through the odds to win the Big Ten, odds to make the playoff, and Ohio State's odds have come down, and now they're neck and neck with Michigan as favorites to win the Big Ten and make the playoff. They're sort of even with Michigan, whereas before there was a gap. They were ahead. I'm like, how are the odds makers coming to that conclusion after they got dusted the last 2 years? They got a new quarterback, and they're on the road. How do you come up with odds greater for Ohio State winning the Big Ten to make the playoff? I have no idea. I'm curious, though, talking about Ohio State. I may have touched on this a little bit last week. It's hard to miss the lack of bravado when it comes to the quarterback. Last 3 quarterbacks, all first-round picks. You're used to Ohio State fans thinking they're going to be, they're going to be an NFL team playing in college on offense. And yet you don't hear that. There's been talk about inconsistency at the quarterback position going back to the spring. Ryan Day was saying that. Kyle McCord, we need some more consistency. And then most recently, Josh Perry, who's now in NBC Sports, formerly with the Big Ten Network, he was on this podcast, Always College Football, which I was actually supposed to be on. And they asked him about the Ohio State quarterback battle. And you guys tell me if you buy this. He said a lot of people thought it was just going to be Kyle McCord's job, and Devin Brown maybe could push, but wouldn't really be in the mix there. This thing is actually very, very close. And from the people that I've spoken to, they're confident in either quarterback's ability to go out there and be successful. But I think they're just looking for that consistency. It feels like as this drags out a little bit more, it does start to favor a younger guy in Devin Brown, who's got some really good movement skill and athletic ability, which would be, that was the end of the quote, which would be a surprise, Brian, if that's the case. The question is, do you buy it?
Yeah, if Devin Brown is actually more mobile than Kyle McCord, he'll probably get the job. Because whoever gets that job, their left tackle is going to be a San Diego State transfer. We talked about this on our podcast, who's not the number 7 blocker in the group of 5 last year. He's not the number 7 blocker in the Mountain West last year. He's the number 7 blocker, according to Pro Football Focus, on the San Diego State Aztecs.
Thank you.
And that guy is going to be their starting left tackle by all assertions. So, yeah, I buy it, because the number one thing that the Ohio State Buckeyes quarterback is going to have to do is run for his life.
Well, more than that, I mean, Ohio State is still running an Urban Meyer offense.
You think
And
so? I don't think so,
you don't
Craig.
think so?
No, I
don't
don't.
think so.
I think it's a Kevin Wilson offense. Like the
Okay.
Urban Meyer offense went out with JT Barrett, and once it was Haskins, it was a different beast
Well,
entirely. And that's
Haskins was different, yeah.
and that's another thing about Ohio State last year is that they no longer have Kevin Wilson.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that Ryan Day can run an offense, but Kevin Wilson made Indiana into one of the most interesting offenses in college football. Losing him is going to be a blow.
Yeah, all I know is that Meyer has said and written that don't run a spread if your quarterback can't run the ball. That he says if your quarterback can't run the ball, you better not run read options and you better not run spreads because it ain't going to work. And whatever else you think of Meyer, I don't think anyone thinks he doesn't know what he's doing as an offensive
Ryan Day
football
came
coach.
in and immediately said we're going to be different on offense than they were under Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer ran a power spread. I've talked at length to Vance about this. He said, "Man, we were a smash mouth team from a spread scheme. You can spread to run, and that's what they did. That's not Ryan Day, and you saw it last week. This is why it is my suspicion. I'll never find anyone that can corroborate it for me, but it's my suspicion that Urban Meyer scripted the first couple series for Ohio State in that game last year because it was so un-Ohio State like that what they were as far as offensive approach. And then after the first two series, they get all pass happy and they go back to being Ryan Day again, right? I just don't think that's Ryan Day's style, spread to run. He wants to throw it around the yard, and I think it'll be hard for him to be different now that he's going to be. That was another revelation this week. Is he's going to give Hartline some play calling duties, but the guy who's going to have his finger on the trigger is Ryan Day. What that means to me, they're going to be basketball on grass, or try to be.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to do that, you still have to block. And if there's one reason to be optimistic, one of many reasons to be optimistic about Michigan this year, is that their offensive line should be good. Now, there's going to be Michigan method in the offensive line. It was interesting, and I haven't listened to your podcast yet, Brian, completely, but I'm sure you talked about it. It's interesting that Harbaugh came out and said our best offensive lineman has been Barnhart, and they're talking about running him at left tackle. I was flabbergasted by that. That left tackle is in the potential cards for Barnhart. What do you think?
Well, Barnhart makes more sense as a left tackle than a right tackle because usually your left tackle is more pass protection oriented. And he has great feet. He's extremely mobile, and his problems to date have been the fact that he's just hasn't been big enough or strong enough to take guys on. Like he got bowled back in the pocket by JTT in the game last year. There was a play in the open field where he pulled outside and met Jacoby Windman and got blasted back, and that kind of reduced the gain on that run. And so on the one hand, I don't think he performed as well as Trente Jones last year, or probably Ladarius Henderson. On the other hand, like what he needs is just to get bigger and stronger, and offensive linemen develop on longer time scales than other people, and it's possible that he's reached some sort of tipping point where the lack of being Zach Zinter isn't as much of a problem anymore. Like ideally, I'm hoping that Henderson kind of comes on, and Henderson wasn't available in the spring, so he comes in to Michigan in fall camp, and he hasn't been on the field very much. So I'm not totally surprised that he's kind of struggling to catch up right now. But I kind of think long term they brought him in to play, and where is he going to play?
Yeah, my question there, Brian, is wasn't he a guard at Arizona State?
Yeah,
and isn't that weird? You wouldn't think a guard there would come in to be a tackle here. It strikes me as sort of an oddity, at least.
Yeah, so they played him at left tackle as a true freshman, I believe, when he was 17 years old. and they moved him inside. He doesn't have ideal tackle height, but he has long arms, and he's one of those guys where, like, yeah, in the NFL he's a guard, but those guys, NFL level guards with long arms, can often play tackle in college, and it's not. He's not going to be Jake Long out there, but can he match what John Runyon did? Probably.
Runyon, right. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's a fair comparison. I mean, Runyon was a good tackle here, but he's probably a guard. And
yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that move puts a cap on his ceiling, because if he was really, Jake Long, he'd be playing left tackle, but that doesn't mean that he wouldn't be a good college option. Like, I mean, he's a guy who I believe the Athletic Dane Brugler ranked as the number 10 guard available for the upcoming draft. And, a draftable guard in his final year who's played some tackle before doesn't really raise alarm bells for me.
Yeah, I think you nailed the comparison on fire this morning, Brian. John Runyon is that comparison for LD, and John Runyon has been a starting guard with the Packers. It's the Packers, I think, for the last couple seasons. So I think that's the trajectory for.
I'm just remembering that Notre Dame game that John Runyon played, where when everybody was like, "Oh, we're terrible, we're gonna die," and then he was like an all Big Ten level player by the end of the season. And so you might see something like that trajectory, right? Because Henderson's probably going to have some issues at first because he transferred, and offensive line is hard and all that stuff. So I think he might have a bit of a slow start, but by mid-season, I think he'll probably be pretty good.
Yeah, at the very, if he stays on the bench, that means Carson Barnhart has really, really taken his game up a notch. And I like the idea of letting some game action help determine it. I want to amend my comment before we get to a break a little bit. If it's as you say it is, if the offensive line is that much of a sieve, then they may not have a choice but to play Devin Brown, to your point. And if they do that, well, now you got to be more Urban Meyer-like. You got to incorporate some more of that. And I imagine, Herb will be down there helping them implement some of that strategy into their equation. It reminds me of? It reminds me of 2004 Ohio State, which is painful to remember. But you remember Justin Zwick? Remember Justin Zwick was a big time quarterback recruit,
barely.
Right? Yeah, the passer, the guy who was going to be the next drop back passer for them, and he was competing with Troy Smith. Troy Smith, who had I think he had faced a suspension, and he came off suspension, and he
but Zwick was completely immobile, wasn't he?
He was completely immobile. Troy Smith could actually run around some, as we know. He had a really, really good arm, which is what they say about Devin Brown, and the rest, as they say, is history, which I hate to remember. But they might wind up in a similar situation, going with a guy who wasn't projected to be the guy, but might, and for this offense, might wind up being the better fit for what they need in the grand scheme of things. You just hope he isn't as good as Troy Smith. Right?
Yeah.
Hate to bring up bad memories. We got to get to a break. Be back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
And we are clear on the radio.
We are clear on the radio.
Sam, isn't this kid from Underwood really going to end up at LSU? Isn't LSU at the last second going to drive a Brinks truck?
Look, I did the recruiting
door?
roundup this morning.
Okay.
I don't know if you listened to it. I said, look, this is one of those times where the business interests that are partial to Michigan need to step up and get their NIL plan ready, not as an inducement, because listen, if you're Ford Motor Company, for instance, Bryce Underwood as an NIL representative works for you wherever he goes. It works for you if he's at LSU. It works for you if he's at Ohio State. All those things. He'd be a great pitch man wherever he is. But if he goes to Michigan, oh my God! I mean, right? Can you imagine all of the different things he could do right there at the new headquarters that they're working on down there at the Michigan Central Depot? Right? I mean, there's just so many storylines that you can tap into if he stays home. It makes sense for you to start, planting those seeds that, hey, we are ready to do a deal. And we could do some special things with you. And there could do some really special things with you if you're close by. And that's not an inducement. You're going to do a deal with him wherever he goes. But boy, if you go to Michigan, man, that's even better. That kind of thing needs to happen, in my opinion, because that's what it is. And you find loopholes. You find ways to find ways to make the rules, or find ways to get an advantage within the rules. We see it going on with the Missouri State Legislature, right? Well, all of these money people that with businesses that are Michigan alums, you need to be doing that, or thinking that way with Bryce Underwood, because he's a generational dude, man. I think he's the best recruit out of this state since Drew Henson.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it's going to take some vision by the kid and his family, his dad and his family, to see that, and there are visions, and then there's the Brinks truck, which doesn't take much of a vision. And these things usually seem to go the way of Brinks truck. And so all I can say is I hope and suspect that Michigan will be paying attention to the kid from down in Findlay. I think that's where he's from.
Hey, man, you understand? Hey, man, I'm not the one in control of that.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Because here's the reality of the situation with a guy like Bryce Underwood. It's not like if he goes to LSU. Do I think that the Joe Burrow case that they're making with him is ridiculous? Yes, I do. But it's not like he's going to a program that he can't experience success at. And same thing with Ohio State. They put the last 3 quarterbacks in the first round. Like any of these programs can make an on-field Bama. Like you can go there, you could have a lot of success if you're Bryce Underwood. So, it's gonna be hard to create a great deal of separation from the field when it comes to projecting him on the field. It'll be who has the best relationships, and I think Michigan is out front in that regard. But then, as you weigh the other things, NIL is going to be one of them.
Coming back on radio, guys. Stand by.
All right, we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
Back
on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. So, in the break, and this is funny that I talked about this morning on the recruiting roundup, talked about Bryce Underwood, because that's exactly who Craig brought up in the break and said, hey, isn't this just going to be a Brinks truck thing with LSU coming in and backing it up? First of all, I think there are going to be a number of Brinks trucks. Right? I don't think LSU has a bigger Brinks truck than Bama, and I think he's the type of recruit that's going to encourage schools that haven't had the Brinks truck back up to back it up, because I think he's that good. I think he's the best guy out of this state since Drew Henson. It is taking me out. I don't like to do I try to steer away from the hyperbole. I steered away from it with Donovan. Like they thought he's better than Tyrone Wheatley. I don't think he's better than Tyrone Wheatley, right? Sorry, Donovan. Don't send me no hate mail as a result.
Well, wait a minute. I think he is.
I don't. I
do. So Donovan, you can send me a nice email.
But my point in bringing it up is it's a leap for me to say that about a kid who hasn't even taken a snap in his junior year yet. But he's a generational guy, and he's right here in your state. Like, we see what NIL has become. And so you look at what it is and figure out a way to, within the rules, cultivate the environment, make it as appealing as you can. And I'm talking about from an NIL perspective, make it as appealing as you can for that kid to come here. And that doesn't just come down to Michigan, just like it doesn't just come down to Missouri. It doesn't just come down to Drinkwitz and his staff down there at Mizzou. You got the state legislature doing some things to encourage players to go to Mizzou, in-state players to stay home. And I think whether it's the state legislature, which seems to be elite, or business interests, which you can come up with a concept or a strategy that is not an inducement, that is within the rules from an NIL standpoint that will benefit Michigan. And I think you got to have people who are affiliated with Michigan thinking along those lines with this kid. He is that important. He is a generational talent. It'd be a huge deal. If they get him, it's a huge deal. If they lose him, it's a huge deal. He is that big a recruit.
So you think he's a better prospect than Dante Moore?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay. And what's
He's
going
more
on with
physically
Dante
talented than
Moore?
Dante
Is
Moore.
he going to stay at UCLA? Because there was some noise he was leaving or wanting
And
to
to
transfer.
clarify real
already.
quick, we weren't comparing
Henson to Wheatley.
Henson to Wheatley.
Yeah.
We were comparing Henson to Bryce Underwood.
Yeah.
And I think that Bryce Underwood is the best prospect out of this state since Drew Henson. So that's saying a lot. I mean, we've had Dante Moore is a damn good high school quarterback prospect. You know, he's a 5-star. He quarterbacked this team to a title out the gate, just like Bryce, right? So it's not like we were talking about, not having anything to really compare him to. That's jumping over a lot of really good talent. Donovan Edwards is really good talent, but this dude's on another level, in my opinion. And you gotta do what you gotta do to get him, and not cheat, but figure out a way to get close to that line without going over it, Brian. That's my opinion.
What line?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. Like,
No, we understand.
Where's the line?
There's
like-
none apparent to me. I mean, I hear you.
Like, Jim Harbaugh's going to recruit this guy, and he's like, all right, well, we can't pay you right, like directly, but here's this guy. I'm going to be in the bathroom. You guys have a nice chat. Like, I mean,
Just don't buy him a hamburger.
right. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So-
But this is we've talked about this before. This is a guy who's gonna be offered a lot of upfront money, and if Michigan's gonna get him, like they gotta come to the plate. And this isn't gonna be a situation where it's like, well, it's 50 grand, who cares? This is gonna be 6 figures, like mid 6 figures at least, and that's enough money to really change your circumstances before your ACLs can get obliterated. And so it's a reasonable thing to make some decisions on. Now, does Michigan have to be the best offer? No, but they do have to be in the ballpark. So, and there's frankly no excuse if they aren't. Like, it's 2023, folks. The Pac-12 has been obliterated. It's time to give some kids some upfront money.
Yeah, in the ballpark, I agree with you. I think that's a big deal with him. I really don't think he's hunting. He's out there, hey, what do you got, kind of thing. But it's a given, like, to your point, that schools are going to have a lot up front, and so what do you offer in comparison to that? You can't not be in the ballpark and expect to get them. So anyone thinking that that's the case, and I don't think any Michigan fan thinks that. I'm talking about any Michigan affiliate, any money person, any business person. You got to be in that ballpark if you're going to get this guy, if you're going to keep him home. He is that kind of talent. He is that kind of talent, man. Like, you see this kid, and the thing that's so striking, like, did he turn 16 yet? He might have just turned 16. He looks like he's 26 years old. I mean, physically, he's there already. He's a college quarterback already. And then you put it together with where he is above the neck from a leadership perspective, and moxie and his drive and all the extra work that he just has. You put it all together with this dude. So you can't just go losing guys like that. Not to say, we were just talking about Kalen King. Like, can you guys imagine if Michigan had gotten Kalen King? Can you imagine?
Sam.
And they were right there. I mean, if you had Steve Clinkscale 1 year sooner, Kalen King's on this team. And so this dude is
It's not too late. We got enrollment has not ceased. He can still enroll in classes. Show him the rest of the team and be like, Kalen, come on, bro. You gave up 411 yards rushing last year. Just come on over here. Come on.
Yeah, man. They just relationships were the difference there. And if you had him, you get Kalen King. Well, I mean, that was a major loss. This is losing Drew Henson. This is losing Drew Henson.
Yeah.
So
along those lines, I mean, do you guys have any sense about what's going on opposite Will Johnson? I know Will Johnson's been out, but I suspect he'll be back early in the season.
So this is my guess.
My
guess right now is Mikey. Mikey is
going to play the other corner.
Feel the safety, but all these look. I think the first couple of games are going to be the proving ground because they want Mikey at nickel. Who is the guy that they're most confident in at the position? Is my point. I think they're most confident in Mikey.
But that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're going to have to put a third cornerback out there at some point.
Anyway. So, I mean, as they move on, who's going to emerge? Josh Wallace. Amarian has missed some time here in camp with injury. Dark horse guy, Keyshawn Harris, the guy they talked a lot about. Which, again, I kind of chuckled at it too until I started hearing more and more guys talk about it.
I'm not chuckling. Last year at this time, I said, I like this Keyshawn Harris guy, and so
you did? Okay,
yes,
pat yourself on the back, man.
I mean, I've been talking up Keyshawn Harris for a year. And every time I see him, I say, this is the guy I like. I don't care if he's a walk-on. I don't care if he's a zero star.
Wait, what did you see? Where and what did you see from Keyshawn Harris?
I don't know. But I've mentioned this a year ago. Maybe I saw him in the spring game. I think spring practices.
He has looked good in 2 consecutive spring games.
Right. And so it was last year in the spring game. I said, that guy. That's the guy that looks good to me.
Well, the players have been talking him up big time in the offseason. And without me asking specifically about him, he came up and talking to Donovan when I was asking about who's the fastest guy on the team. And he mentioned Keyshawn Harris is one of the guys in the mix. When I talked to CJ in the summer about, hey man, tell me about the other corner, like what do you think? He said, guys coming along, guys developing, but he said, when I face Keyshawn Harris, I got to go to the line with a plan. It's like that, not to disrespect the other guys, but he said, you got to have a plan when you can't just line up and think you're going to beat him. I'm like, wow, man, really? Roman Wilson. We're about to put out the behind the uniform with him. He talked about Keyshawn Harris. So when you hear that many guys say it, like, man, there's something to that. But now you got to see it in game situations. Right. That's all practice stuff. Not to say he can't do it, but now you put him to some game pressure and see if he can withstand the game pressure and still play the same way. But pat yourself on the back, Craig. If you caught that one.
I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I just said last year at this time I saw him in the spring and I liked him a lot. And I also recall other players talking him up. And this goes back to my first point from today. A kid comes in, he's a 0-star or 2-star, and that seems to stay with them regardless of what their performance on the field actually is. And when I saw the kid last year, I said, this is a real kid. This is a real player. So, and I saw the same thing this spring. So anyway.
Well, they if I had to pick today, if it's not Mikey there, I think it'd be Josh Wallace or Keyshawn Harris. If it's not, Jade McBurrows in the mix. I'm just basing that on who I've heard the most about. Jade McBurrows obviously very much in the mix there as well, and we have Brian Cook back on as well. So let me get BC back in the mix. There we go with BC. So that's just a guess on my part. It could really wind up anywhere. That's one of the positions that I think you could see the audition lasting the entire non-conference scale, all 3 games, where they're looking to see who the guy is and see who emerges. Because Brian's right. I mean, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul if you move.
You can't.
To a certain extent, you are. Here's why I think it's not a huge detriment, because I feel like they are more confident in their depth at safety right now than their depth at corner. And Rob Moore can play nickel. You can always come back in with Quentin Johnson as your other safety with Makari Page. I think they feel pretty good about that. That the other corner, the corner depth is more uncertain. And so Mikey makes you feel really, really solid about that if you got to go that route. Ideally, though, one of those other guys will emerge at corner and they'll keep Mikey at nickel. Because Harbaugh said, Brian, before we get out of here, you can get the last word. Harbaugh said they're their best with Mikey's and nickel, and that's where they want him to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that it's going to work out because, honestly, the second corner position, because you have Will Johnson on the other side, you can just play a lot of quarter half and shade the coverage. And then it's like, how bad can it be? Because you can just put Will Johnson one-on-one with the boundary guy and be like, that's fine. And then you get to severely mitigate your one potential weakness on defense. And honestly, by mid-season, there's 6 guys competing for this job. One of them is going to emerge into a decent cornerback. And Josh Wallace provides you a very high floor. Like, this is a guy has a ton of experience. He's played a ton of man-to-man because he's been under Don Brown. He might not be athletically everything that you desire, but he's going to be decent, And if he's got a safety over the top and he doesn't have to run with Marvin Harrison Jr., it'll be fine.
It's a great point. That was the adjustment. Yeah. Michigan State, Keon Coleman's killing them. They go quarter half, take them out the game. So great call there. And it might Mike McCray said to me when they were recruiting Josh Wallace, he said he's the 4-5 version of David Long. So if you got the 4-5 version of David Long, you're gonna win with that. So I just gotta see how he does in these first few games and let the rest let chips fall where they may. All right, fellas, that's gonna do it for us today. Another spirited discussion. Next week when we do this, we'll be talking preview. It'd be game week. Cannot wait. Great job as always. We'll talk to you next week. To the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports Ann Arbor,